Good morning and happy Sunday, everybody. I'm Charlotte McGinnis, and as always, I want to thank you for joining me for my Sunday Soulful Conversation. Well, I don't know about where you guys are. I know in Florida, down there, it's hot as can be, and it's been record high up here this week. So, pretty warm, but beautiful, and I'm not complaining. It's just you got to adjust, right? Just like life. We have to just adjust to what comes our way. So, anyway, just want to remind you guys that in addition to my Sunday soulful conversations, I have other things going on through the week. We're in full force with our Sermon on the Mount book study on Wednesdays. That's pretty much not open anymore to join, but thinking that we're going to be doing the Mystic Jesus from Marianne Williamson for our next book study. So if you're interested in that, keep that in mind. I'll put out notices and we'll get working on that. Take a little breather, and maybe in a month or so we'll do that. Also, this week, 5 p.m. Eastern Time, for my Heart to Heart Soulful Conversation, my guest is Jane Weed, aka Weed Roy, and she is an amazing woman down in Florida. She's a mortician and does really amazing work and with death and dying and supporting people, green burials, really amazing woman. So definitely don't want to miss what Weed has to say. In addition, she's just a great gal. And of course, as always, Fridays at 11 o'clock, our Course in Miracles, all are welcome to join that. And then the prayer ministry is here to support you any way that we can. And please, all you have to do is go to my website to find out more information on all of this, charlottemcginnis.com. Okie doke. Well, just 15 minutes ago, I said goodbye to my sister Molly, who came up for a visit this week and on her way to West Virginia. It was supposed to be an overnight and ended up staying a few days. And we did a lot of work. She helped me actually do a couple of projects around here that needed to be done. One being cleaning out the storage unit, which don't we all just collect too much stuff? I had a whole storage unit, or Ellen and I did, of all the things we unloaded from our RV when we sold it 2 years ago or so. And just nice stuff, but just sitting there. So we just really went through, cleaned the whole thing out, and that is done. So that's money in our pocket that we don't have to pay for that unit. And that was felt good to get out of the way. And of course, keeping the lawn going, picking the weeds, watering the flowers. I love doing that and enjoying life. Life is good. One thing that we actually did, though, this week, and those of you that live up in this part of the world, Hendersonville, Asheville, Greenville area, we cleaned out, or excuse me, cleaned out. We took a bike ride on the Swamp Rabbit Trail, which is from Travelers Rest to Greenville and back. And I haven't been on a bike in many years. Well, I can't say that, a couple of years, but for a long bike ride like that, 20 miles, my rear end was sore to say the least, but I made it, and it was a very hot day. I was totally wiped out when we got home, but I was glad I did it. We rented bikes, but next time for sure, electric bikes is the way to go for me from here on out. I need that little extra help. But keep me posted if you guys have any advice on electric bikes. I know my friend Peggy, if you're listening, Peggy, I'm waiting to hear your coaching on the best bike for me to get. Okie doke. Well, on to the talk here. I titled it Arguing for Your Limitations, or Are You Arguing for Your Limitations? And the first place I think I heard of this was, gosh, 30 years ago, from Joe Dispenza. Many of you all know I talk about him often. He's an awesome teacher, overcame a serious accident where he really was told he would never walk again. And he's more than walking now, and he's attracting thousands of people to his seminars and does beautiful videos and books, and just an amazing guy. But he was very involved with the Ramtha community out in Yelm, Washington at that time. And he was on a lot of the old videos that we used to watch. We used to be big fans of Ramtha, still are, just not engaged as much as we were in the past. But he talked about we argue for our limitations. And it's so true. I mean, how often do we sit here and just, rather than be willing to open up to a bigger picture, we're going to explain to you and argue for every reason I'm failing or not feeling good or not succeeding or what have you. So we're focusing on that which we really don't want. And then we fight to defend it, right? Well, we're going to talk about that today because I think it's an interesting topic. If you also know Richard Bach, who wrote Illusions, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, an amazing author, man, he says, argue for your limitation, and sure enough, they're yours. And ain't that the truth? So to argue for your limitations mean you lay out an elaborate defense of having no capacity, no knowledge, no awareness, no time, no money, no babysitter, ... The focus becomes on more what you don't have than on what you do have. The emphasis situates itself on limitation rather than possibility. And I think we're all guilty of this. I think we all sometimes keep ourselves in this box and we don't open up to the bigger possibility because we're thinking that we're a victim of our programming and of our past and our genes and all of these things we're going to talk about as I go on with this conversation. Well, many years ago, and this could have been probably in the mid-90s, 1990s, 30 years ago, Jerry Jampolsky, who was the founder of the Attitudinal Healing Institute, very involved with Course in Miracles. He's a psychiatrist. Well, he's since moved on to his next life, but wonderful human being. Just he and his wife traveled the world teaching people these principles to live in a more peaceful, collaborative way. And so anyway, Jerry came to our Palm Beach Center for Living for the weekend to do a 3-day seminar. And it was fabulous. And the best part about it was he was living in Hawaii. He flew to West Palm Beach. I picked him up at the airport on Thursday, took him back, I think, on Monday. So I had lots of time to spend with him. And first thing he says is, I want to meet your people. Take me to some people who can use my services. And I was like, wow, that's different. It wasn't like I took him to his 5-star motel that some of the people required. He was humble, simple, and wonderful. So I took him to a friend, Paul's house. And Paul was a quadriplegic who had had a motorcycle accident, and really sweetheart of a guy. He's since moved on as well. And all things considered, he came to our Sunday services. He, had the transportation that would bring him, and he would come on Sundays and for occasional workshops, but he was very limited on his ability to do much, obviously. So when Jerry met him, he was very kind, very engaging. They had a great connection, great conversation. And Jerry had asked Paul, are you coming to the seminar this weekend? And Paul's like, no, I can't afford a ticket. Jerry's like, what do you mean you can't afford a ticket? Forget that. You go ahead, come. You'll give him a ticket, right, Charlotte? I said, absolutely. Then it was like, well, my transportation only goes till 5 o'clock and the seminar goes past that and it's in the evening. So Jerry's like, well, how much does that cost for private transportation? Paul gave him a number, a few $100, what have you. He said, okay, reached in his pocket, I'll pay for that. What else? He says, can you come now? And he kept making excuses. And I'm not saying any of this to pick on Paul, because by no means did I feel like he was doing anything that none of us would have done as well. But when we got back in the car, he said, Jerry said to me, did you see how he was arguing for his limitations? That I offered a solution to every reason that he thought was a problem, and yet he continued to find an excuse. And so I thought that was interesting. That was a big red flag. And then shortly thereafter, Jerry and I were speaking, And he made a comment about something I said. And I said, well, yeah, that's just pretty much my nature. And he got quiet and he shook his head and he goes, when somebody tells me that something is their nature, that usually tells me that they're not willing to change it. In other words, that's not who we are. We think it's who we are, but if it's not serving us, then we have to change it, or we have the ability to change it and move to a higher place. So Jerry definitely, to be honest, I can't even remember what he talked about that entire weekend. Well, the Course of Miracles and attitudinal healing and so on and so forth. But those two experiences, questioning my nature, and then the experience with Paul, will live in my heart forever. They definitely got my attention. So argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. So I invite you guys to really look at where you may be thinking that you're a victim of your circumstances, or that there's no way for you to move on from any situation that may seem limiting. This gal, actually Evelyn Waugh, W-A-U-G-H. It says that Evelyn is a man, he, but I don't know. I've never heard of Evelyn Waugh, but I like what Evelyn Waugh has to say. And she says, he says, they say, when we argue for our limitations, we get to keep them. Sort of like Richard Bach says, right? Essentially, Waugh reminds us that when we justify our limitations or convince ourselves that we cannot achieve a certain goal or overcome obstacles, we perpetuate their existence in our lives. Moreover, this quote raises a fascinating philosophical concept that goes beyond the surface of interpretation. The idea that our mindset and beliefs shape our reality. When we argue for our limitations, we essentially undermine our potential. So the idea that our mindset and beliefs shape our reality. Yes, we have our beliefs. We can change our beliefs, change your mind, change your world. Back to our book study that we've been doing, Sermon on the Mount by Emmett Fox. We've been speaking about this past week about the secret chamber, which is a chamber of our thoughts, and that's where all creation takes place. So there are no limits except by our belief systems. And anytime we tap into old belief or argue for why I'm like this or why I can't move forward, that's keeping me stuck in where I am. So we're undermining our true potential. But by accepting our perceived boundaries without question, we relinquish the opportunity for personal growth and development. This mindset can hinder our progress in various aspects of life, be it personal relationships, career aspirations, or self-improvement endeavors. So if we just accept that's the way my parents did it, that's the way my grandparents did it, that's the way I learned it in school, all these programs, if we just buy into that and say that's just the way it is, then we're basically putting the brakes on our ability to have healthier relationships, the career of our choice, the life of our choice, anything that elevates us. When we buy into the notion that we're limited in our abilities or certain circumstances cannot be changed, we subconsciously confine ourselves within these self-imposed barriers. So, what this reminds me of is, our thoughts create our reality. So whatever we're feeding our field, okay, every moment has an effect, has an impact. So if I'm continuing to play the old tapes over and over, then I'm going to continue to have the same outcome over and over. And it really is about getting to our subconscious, unconscious part of ourselves and purge that out, sort of, as I heard years ago, replace that old VHS with a new VHS, a new recording, a new tape, right? So we have to really be vigilant for God and his kingdom, for love, for change, for possibility, and not allow ourselves to go into arguing for our limitation and our weakness. Interestingly, this concept aligns with the philosophical theory of solipsism. Solipsism proposes that an individual's mind is the only thing that exists, and everything else is a creation of one's imagination or consciousness. While this philosophy can be both controversial and challenging to accept, Waugh's quote can be seen as a metaphorical reflection of this theory. By arguing for our limitations, we inevitably shape our reality to fit the boundaries we have set for ourselves. So it's like breaking free of these limited thought systems. We have to change our mind. We have to recognize when thoughts are not serving our greater good or the greater good of others, and to be willing to change them rather than to defend. I'm like this because, and that's so not empowering, allowing for higher consciousness to prevail. Contrastingly, embracing a mindset that challenges these limitations and believes in infinite possibilities of personal growth and achievement can lead to remarkable transformations. When we refuse to buy into the notion of being confined by our personal limitations, we open ourselves up to new opportunities, experiences, and personal breakthroughs. This shift in mindset encourages us to question our preconceived notions, examine our fears, and seek creative solutions to obstacles that would have otherwise held us back. It's worth noting that arguing for our limitations can be a subconscious defense mechanism. And it's so amazing how quickly that subconscious defense mechanism comes to the surface. So we, may have a fear of failure, self-doubt, lack of confidence that leads us to adopt this mindset that accepts limitations as a perceived safety net. And I do believe that. I think that often, it's a protection, it's a barrier, it's a safety net, because often we shield ourselves from disappointment or vulnerability. And in other words, I would say that even though it's painful, it's familiar. And to step out into the bigger field of possibility, the unknown, it's sometimes scary. But so sometimes we cling more to the pain because it's what we know rather than the possibilities. But I really know, and for myself, when I get into these patterns and argue for my limitations, then what happens is I feel lower energy, not as vibrant, not as happy. And it's not a healthy place to be, because when we are in that vibration, as I often say, happy cells, vibrant cells are healthy cells. When we play these old tapes over and make excuses and see ourselves as victims of a circumstance, a situation and we fight to the end to protect them, we're keeping ourselves sick, afraid, vulnerable, whatever. So it's essential to recognize personal growth often requires stepping outside of our comfort zone and embracing the unknown. And I believe that the greatest prayer is the Lord's Prayer, thy will be done. That one line alone. Thy will, not my will, be done. And that's where, if we just step out of that, have that trust and faith and confidence that all is well, then how awesome is that? So there's lots of individuals who've defied their limitations. I talk about Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I've not failed. I have found 10,000 ways how not to build a light bulb." There you go. He's not arguing for his limitations. He's watching the process. Helen Keller overcame deaf and blindness to become an influential author. There's so many other people who have overcome adversity and challenges and use those as stepping stones rather than an excuse for weakness. So we need to step back, recognize where we're holding on to these limitations and even more so defending them. And so it's time to challenge and discard the arguments that hold us back. And I think that we're here to move into a reality filled with boundless possibilities. And that only happens in the mind of love, of God, where there are infinite possibilities. Well, another angle to come into this same concept, Bruce Lipton, PhD, Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's an awesome guy. If you haven't heard of him, I'd suggest you look him up. YouTube has lots of Bruce Lipton, lots of Joe Dispenza, lots of Greg Braden. Spend a lot of time watching those guys. Good stuff. So how often do you hear someone say, it's in my genes? That's why I have heart disease, diabetes. That's why I have this personality trait or whatever. And then even more so when people are adopted, they go chasing down, they want to find their birth parents to identify genetics. And I'm not saying that's not a positive thing, but kind of I am, because if we really, epigenetics says that it moves beyond that I am a victim of my genes, but it's rather our environment, our programs, our thoughts, our choices that create these situations. For example, if you grew up in a family that ate, I don't know, sugar all the time and whatever it is, that fried foods, and created a situation from that. It's not necessarily the genes, it was what we're feeding our body, what we're feeding our mind, what we're feeding our soul. So epigenetics is really such an empowering thought system, and it's been proven to be true. It's a new type of science that's growing in popularity and the promise in the scientific world. Epigenetics is the study of cellular and physiological traits, or the external and environmental factors that turn our genes on and off, and in turn define how our cells actually read those genes. It works to see the true potential of humankind and the cells in our body. You know, we don't have to be a victim of our gene pool. We can shift anything. And I think that there again, we argue for this and say, oh no, this is what I was raised. My parents, this goes back 5 generations. Well, we can stop that cycle. We really can. We can create, I talk about this all the time, but our body regenerates, restores, and renews itself. Every cell, every organ, is continually restoring and renewing itself. But if I'm feeding it the same thoughts, ideas, feelings, food, whatever, then I'm going to continue to have the same result. And then that just gives me I'm a victim of my gene pool, or I'm a victim of my past. Not the case. We do have way more power than we ever have been taught to believe. So more on Bruce. Biology of Belief is actually the book where he discusses this in great detail. He's Bruce Lipton, a stem cell biologist, recipient of the Goy Peace Award, and a keynote presenter at many national and international conferences. He began his career as a cell biologist and went on to examine the principles of quantum physics and how that is integrated into the understanding of how cells process information. Through this, he produced studies that were breakthroughs regarding cell membranes. His studies show that the outer layer of the cell is essentially an organic computer chip and worked like the brain of the cell. From 1987 to 1992, he researched this idea and found the environment which would operate through the membrane controlled the behavior and physiology of the cell. It would turn genes on and off and help create the modern science of epigenetics. Well, One thing I do, this reminds me of these studies were 1987 to 92. Well, recently we hear everything about AI, and that, now people are saying there's people who talk about the immortality chip. And there's also, I think we're too willing to just surrender everything to AI. And I do believe that there is you know, I've heard Greg Braden speak a lot about this recently, and the fact that, there is a battle for the soul of humanity. And so many people are just willing to give it over to a chip, right? We've already given so much to this. This technology has really taken us over more than I'd like to admit to. But that being said, the more we give our power away and say, oh, this technology is going to save me, there is a balance. And what this is teaching, and what Greg is teaching, and all these great teachers, Dispenza, is that, we have this technology in every cell of our being. We don't have to go outside of ourselves. There are things we can do. Stay in a positive frame of mind. Allow yourself to release anything that's obstructing your well-being and peace of mind. Be joyful. Feed your body, mind, and soul with things that are uplifting. And when we do that, we can actually change the anatomy of our physical body, our emotional, and our spiritual bodies, and be totally different beings. But we're so willing to give away our power, argue for our limitations. So epigenetics didn't just change Lipton's professional life, it changed his personal life. He found a deeper understanding of cell biology and how the mind can control the body functions, as well as the possibility of an immortal spirit. He took the science of epigenetics, put it into his personal biology, and learned his daily life improved, as did his physical life. Learning from epigenetics, he wanted to pass that on to others. So our spirit is eternal. It's not a possibility, as this says. Our spirit is changeless, formless, and eternal, but we've given away that, we've removed ourselves from that connection, I believe. We've just given away, fix this, change that. We're seeing ourselves as victims. We're not accepting responsibility for our situations. So my suggestion is, again, to release that story of arguing for your limitations and tap into a higher state of consciousness. So epigenetics has the potential to change your life by making you happier and healthier with a greater sense of spiritual well-being. Through this experience with epigenetics, Dr. Lipton can teach you how to take advantage of this new science and begin a happy, healthy life. So I can just invite you, it's all free. I mean, you can buy his books, you can go to his seminars. Dr. Bruce Lipton, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Greg Braden, these three teachers, and there's many teachers. Mark Hyman's one of my favorites, Dr. Mark Hyman. But, those guys are really into such a high level of consciousness, and it's all inner consciousness. Dr. Hyman talks about food is medicine. So there's so much out there that is, if we would just tap into it and use it and let go of our need to argue for our limitations, and I can't do that because, we would have a whole different experience. So how do you stop fighting for your limitations and fight for your potential? Well, here's a few easy ways to do that. Replace the word can't with can. Replace the reasons why you can't change with why you can change. Stop using past failures to prove future outcomes. Use past success to fight for future possibilities. Decide to be someone who can change. And I think that that's so powerful. Just those 5 little simple ideas can change our life immensely. So ultimately, everything starts with the decision to do it different than I've done in the past. I'm making a decision right here, right now, to move forward from a different idea of who I am. I don't want to identify with my limitations anymore. I want to identify with what's possible. I am more powerful than I've ever led to believe, right? And start feeding that into the field. Flood your mind with things that uplift your spirit, your mind, body, and spirit. Great videos available out there, articles, books. I mean, we've got resources at our fingertip that we've never had. I would suggest that we use those. Allow yourself the gift, give yourself the gift of releasing the need to argue for your limitations and just see what happens. I have a feeling that only good can come out of it for all of us. So anyway, that's about all I got to say today, but thanks for joining. If you feel like sharing this, pass it along, share it. I'd appreciate it. And in the meantime, be well, happy genetics, and see you soon. Namaste.